and welcome back to Mads World. I'm your host Mads, and I hope you've been enjoying the show so far. If you have, please remember to subscribe, rate and review the podcast on your favourite listening platform, and follow me on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, whatever. I'm basically everywhere. You'll have to excuse my voice this week. I have had a bit of a cold, but hopefully you can't notice. I'm very self-conscious of it, but just go with it. In this episode, I am joined by the wonderful, witty and wise Aileen Barratt, aka the Tinder Translator. Aileen is a writer, digital marketer, and the brains behind the Tinder Translator, an Instagram account that has amassed over 77,000 followers. Tinder Translation is all about decoding the subtext of Tinder bios and highlighting red flags. There is loads of innuendo and so many phrases used over and over on dating apps, and so much of what is said masks an ulterior meaning. People send Aileen bios which can be boring, dreadful, funny, or arrogant, and she translates them into what they really say about the person writing them. So much of what men write on dating apps is laced with misogyny, and it's her mission to unmask it. She has recently released a book called Tinder Translator, an A to Z of modern misogyny. It's a hilarious and eye-opening feminist commentary on dating apps, shining a light on the blatant misogyny encountered during every swipe session. Scrolling through profile after profile, you'll see the same stock phrases: no drama, must be able to hold a conversation, or my personal fave, must have banter. But what do they actually mean? There's the funny and the not so funny, the blatant and the not so blatantly obvious, and scrolling through can be depressing and enraging in equal measure. In this episode, we chat about some key things Aileen has learned through her own years on dating apps, in addition to the experiences of thousands of her followers on Instagram. We dissect some of the stock phrases used on Tinder bios, discuss the concept of Schrodinger's douchebag, which I love, and hopefully leave you feeling a bit more empowered to push back on shitty behaviour or at least see the funny side. Hey Aileen, how are you?
Hi, I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, I'm so buzzing to have you on here because I've just finished your book, which is actually incredible. And I emailed you last night all of my thoughts on it, and I can't wait to speak about them. Obviously, I'm super excited because I sent you like paragraphs of stuff. But let's jump straight into where everything began, which was your Instagram Tinder Translator. So I just want to know how it began and what sort of inspired it to begin with.
So for anyone who doesn't know my page, obviously what's wrong with you, but it started out, and I still do it, but I do talk about lots of other things now as well, as basically Tinder profiles that I would like screenshot and then do like in quotation marks translation of. So I was basically what they really mean, because there's so much like double speak and there's so many kind of like euphemisms and stuff on dating apps. So I started it like over 3 years ago, something like that. Yeah. No, maybe like 4 years ago. I don't know. Anyway, some years ago I started it, and I basically did it because I was on the app and I noticed all this kind of double speak and all this like, and I was also just, kind of exhausted by apps, really like sick of men being, just gross and like, inappropriate basically without any invitation from the other side. And I kind of started it as like I thought this would be funny, like this would be a funny thing, I bet someone's done this already. And when I looked on Instagram, it hadn't been done already, and I was like, what? Did I have an original idea? Oh my god.
God.
I know, right? In 2020, well actually it was probably in 2019. So I just started doing it, and then obviously like people seem to like it, and then so I was at first just screenshotting bios from my own like swiping sessions, and it did make it a little bit more enjoyable because it was like there was this catharsis, because every fifth bio you see is kind of creepy or kind of boring or whatever. So it was like, at least when I saw something really awful, I was like, content, and not just like, oh my god, what's wrong with the world.
Oh my god.
And so it started from there really, and like I started doing things like translating like stock phrases, which is what my book's based on. And everyone like of any gender, any sexuality will know what I mean by stock phrases. If you've been on dating apps, there's these things that come up over and over again. I mean, there's loads I didn't put in there, like looking for a partner in crime and stuff like that, Although that one seems to have gone out of fashion a bit. I think maybe it's for the older folk, but like just so that's kind of where it started. And with the page grew, and with that I kind of a literary agent got in touch with me and asked me if I was interested in writing a book, and I was like, yes, I
Oh my
am.
God, that's so exciting. And I love what you said just then about making a difficult process, like making light of it and making it into something funny. Because I think there's this quote in Nora Ephron's book where her mum tells her, Nora Ephron's basically this writer, you probably know her, but she's like a feminist writer. She wrote When Harry Met Sally and like a bunch of feminist books and stuff. But her mum said to her once, everything is copy, because she was a writer. So it's like, even if bad stuff happens and even if crap stuff happens, or, you know, it's like if you go on a terrible date, everything is copy. If I have a terrible date, it's all content. Like it's going on podcasts. So
Absolutely.
I love that you've channeled all of that into writing this book. And the page has sort of evolved from something funny. I mean, it is still obviously very funny, and your followers love it. But how did it evolve from, you know, being a cathartic process from dating into the work you do now, which is sort of more educating people online about misogyny, and then obviously that led to you writing a book as well? How did that evolve?
Well, I think at first I don't think I had my face on there or anything. It was literally just the bios and stuff. As anyone who follows me or has ever met me will know, have a lot to say about the world, have, you know, lots of opinions, and obviously, as a woman, spent most of my life trying to like keep those in. Just shut up about it, Aileen. Okay, you've got to be attractive. So it would be, you know, so I would kind of talk about things and talk about like dating on my stories and get people to share stories about dating. And inevitably, when you ask women who date men for stories about dating, it gets pretty dark pretty fast. Like and I now, when I'm doing like a kind of more fun, like I want to do like a fun segment where I'm like, so I do like your bad first date stories. I mean, there's a great page, First Dates of Melbourne, which that's their whole thing.
I interviewed her. I have a podcast set with her. Yeah, she's really good. Yeah.
So like, but I just do it every now and again, just try and get people to fit it into the space of a question box as well, because it makes it really funny if you can just do like a 2-sentence bad date. But so I kind of say at the beginning, like not the really bad ones, like as in, and what I mean by that is like not when you've been sexually assaulted, like, or you know,
the fact you have to say that is
and
so
I just, because
up,
I'm like, I can't read. Sometimes I'm in a place where, you know, people do disclose, like, you know, tell me stories, and sometimes it's, I think, in a kind of insensitive, unthinking way, that they're not really thinking that I'm a person who's reading through lots of DMs. But sometimes it's, you know, I take it as a compliment as well, that people feel like connected to me in some way. But it's kind of both. But yeah, so I'll kind of say like, hey, don't, you know, I don't like the funny ones, or, you know, sometimes it can be like outrageously bad ones, but not necessarily, you know, trauma. I don't want any trauma.
Don't unload your trauma. Like, that's for your therapist.
And at the beginning, like, especially when I had less, I think it's really important to do that now, because I've got like 76,000 followers. But when I had like under 10,000 followers, say, it was kind of, you could kind of cope with the volume. It would still be loads of people telling you like quite traumatic shit, but it was kind of like you could just about cope. But it came up again and again, you know, even when I would be doing like, oh my God, like a funny story about how like some men don't wipe their bums, but then it would become about how true story. It would become about, you know, it's so much more like about like the disrespect like that men would, you know, give women, or like the way, you know, and then so it kind of, in a way, like I was already a massive like raging feminist, but it really confirmed our need to talk about this. And then I think during the pandemic, during lockdown, I'm a single mom, so I was on my own in the house for, you know, the first bit where you couldn't bubble with anyone or whatever, and with my son, obviously, and you could still co-parent, thank God. Like, shout out to all the single parents who did that on their own.
Honestly, yeah.
But so like I would, you know, just be on my own a lot. So I started talking more on stories, and I started like having more discussions, and that's actually like, I think probably quite a lot of people were on their phones a lot, online a lot during that time, kind of finding community online in a way that maybe it hadn't before, and so that built it up as well. So it's just become that. And then I've felt, I guess, slowly more emboldened to really talk about, you know, to really give my opinion and really talk about what I think. And that's amazing. It's like, oh my God, do people want to hear what I think? Okay.
It's so nice. And I think lockdown was such a good catalyst for so many awesome content creators that were out there waiting and didn't really have a push or didn't have the time as well with like flexible working and stuff. Because I know I've always had this idea of having a podcast, but it's been like a running joke with mates and stuff, you know, like, oh, you need to get a podcast, you have to get all these stories out there. And I'm like, yeah, whatever. But now and I think that's why stuff like TikTok and Reels is just blown up, because everyone's finally like, those platforms, they don't even make any of their own content. It's just people making it for them, and then they make a shitload of money off other people's content they're making. Like, it's insane. Like,
I know. I mean, the amount of money Instagram makes off women's labor is
a lot.
Really, and like, I can't think about it too much. Someone asked me the other day, like, so do you get like any money from Instagram? And I was like, no. They were like,
no, Dal. But you know what they have with TikTok? With TikTok, there's actually, I've heard about like the TikTok Creator Fund, which I think per 1 million views, so not likes or engagements or anything, per 1 million views, you get 25 quid. So that's like, you know, if you're getting millions and millions, and
better than a kick in the teeth, like
better than a punch in the face, you know.
Yeah. So anyway, we could go down a long road about.
Honestly, you could write it. That's your next book. So
right, sorted.
Yeah, and then you said that your publisher came to you about writing a book, which is awesome. And what was the process behind writing the book, and some of the biggest challenges? Because you know, just for everyone listening, the book is structured in such a way that it's an A to Z of modern misogyny. So, you know, each chapter is its own letter, and that sort of takes a cliche dating app saying and translate it into what that means, and like the misogynistic connotations behind that. But how did you get to that stage where you're like, okay, this is what I'm going to do?
So it was a literary agent who approached me, who first. So when you're, the best way to get a book deal is to have an agent, and that they help you pitch to publishers, and like, you know, they have the contacts and know what they're doing. So it was actually, for those of you who know listening, Clementine Ford's literary agent. She's a massive, I mean, she's obviously, her books are pretty big in the UK, but she's massive in Australia, feminist writer. Also, I would count her as a friend now, which I'm like, hey.
Jealous.
Because when her agent messaged me on Instagram, I messaged her like, is this real? Is this really your agent? And she was like, screenshotted the page. She was like, yeah, if it looks like this. I was like, oh my God, it's real. Okay, cool. But then, so what happens then is, you know, to go to publishers, you write a pitch. So Jacinta, who's my agent, kind of approached me and said, have you ever thought about writing a Tinder translated book? And I already had the idea, basically, to write something, you know, it's quite, I mean, there's some challenging subjects in there, but it's quite an easy read. It's very short chapters, to kind of like, but to expand on, to write more than an Instagram caption about these things, that there's so much to write about. And, you know, really, like, you know, the phrase, it's not that deep. It's like, this book is like, it's that deep. Everything's that deep. Like, one word is that deep. So let me talk about it for a whole page. So we made a proposal. So that was like, so you kind of have the idea already. You have to write like, depending on the kind of book, you write like a sample chapter usually, and then you set out what your chapters are going to be. So I had the A to Z format. I did actually change some of the chapters, what the actual, like, around, and what the actual letters were going to be. There were some things that I felt like it was important to put in, but I was a bit nervous about. So there's one chapter that's called the O chapter is O is for Origins, and it's about the experiences of women of colour on dating apps. And obviously I'm not like an authority on that, but I felt like it would be wrong to not include it at all. So kind of I was kind of umming and erring about that, but put it in anyway, and had some really great like help from people and read some really good things on it. But yeah, so we kind of pitched it, and you send it out to lots of publishers, and most of them say no, and you're like, your loss, whatever. And then it was quite nice, because it was actually this time last year that I got the offer. Was it only this time last year? God, it feels like a long time ago, but it was just before my birthday, which is now just before my birthday again.
That's exciting.
And yeah, it was actually supposed to come out later, but they brought the release date forward, which is very exciting. But yeah, so then I got the offer, and then it's basically, you start, you know, you've got to write it.
Yeah, that's the hard bit.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it was maybe, if and when I write a second book, it might be harder, because I feel like I've been thinking about this stuff for so long that like some of it was formed already, and some of it was stuff that I'd explored on my page. Well, a lot of it stuff that I explored on my page. Yeah, it was just kind of getting it done. And I'm not even amounts of work throughout the deadline period kind of a girl either.
As
so.
if, yeah, I'm the same.
At the end.
Creatives are like that though, aren't we? Like so many of us are just, it's all up in here.
Mm-hmm.
And I tried spreadsheets to organize the podcast. I tried, Notion. I tried all this stuff. And I'm like, I know in my brain what's going on, and no one else needs to know that. So if I ever hire someone, it's going to be such a challenge for them to sort out whatever the fuck's going on up here. But yeah, that's so cool. It's really interesting to hear the process behind it. But yeah, congratulations. I mean, it's such a cool concept. And as we were saying, it's sort of each chapter goes through each letter of the alphabet, and then it will draw on ideas from your typical Tinder bios that maybe have a bit of a deeper meaning. And I've chosen my favorite alphabet letters. I wanted to choose more, but I think the podcast could go on for 2 hours, 5 hours if I picked all A to Z. So if I go through them and say the title of the chapter, it'd be great if you could sort of give us a bit of an insight into what this deeper meaning of these Tinder bios is.
Yeah.
So I've started off with letter C. So the quote is, "Please be able to hold a conversation." So what's sort of the meaning behind this one?
So I'm going to read out the translation from the book because
I
always try and do it off the cuff, and it's not ever as good. So I'm just going to read it. And so the translation I've got for this, for "please be able to hold a conversation" is, I don't really want a conversation. I'm not interested in listening to a voice that isn't my own. I am, however, interested in establishing that it is you who must impress or entertain me when we match, and not the other way around. And I talk about in this chapter the kind of like slightly like haughty snobbishness of putting that in a bio, and the way that some people kind of feel like their dating experience is like somehow different from other people, like we're not all having boring conversations, and like and also the way that you don't think things through. And I think probably this is not the most gendered of the things. It is something that different people put into their bios of all genders, but at the same time I think there is different meaning when it's a kind of a man dating women because of the patriarchy. So the conversation thing is like, oh god, can you like keep up with me, like impress me, and also I did a survey on my stories asking people if they'd matched with someone who said please be able to hold a conversation, and if they had, how many of those had been able to hold a conversation, how many of them had been good conversationalists, and 96%, well, had they been good conversationalists, and 96% of them said no, they hadn't been good conversationalists.
Which is just classic. Like, you made a point in that chapter as well about like like using your bio as a way to complain to people, and using up, like, that's valuable real estate, like, and you're using it to have a moan. But above that, shitty people who are bad conversationalists are still going to match you, and anyone that might be a good conversationalist is just pushed away because they don't want to match with someone who complains. Like, it's just so obvious. Like, it's so common as well. I've seen this on dating apps like countless times, people using it as like does anyone even talk on here? And it's like, why are you complaining? Like,
there's another, I mean, I go into that more in the chapter Q is for quiet, to really shoehorn a few of the letters in there. What's Q gonna be? But yeah, so I talk about, why doesn't anyone talk on here? And I often find that men will complain about how it's hard for men on dating apps, and one of the things they complain about is that like nobody talks, and it's like, that happens to women too. That's not like because women think we're better than you, and we're all like, oh my god, I'm not going to talk to him. Like, I would imagine it might happen to women more because men tend to swipe on, like, say yes to more matches, and then like look at you and go, oh, I don't know, or whatever. It's just part of it, and it's kind of, there's lots of things about dating apps that I think we could all do with taking less personally, and you would enjoy them more if you weren't thinking like, oh god, it's unfair to me that nobody talks to
Yeah.
me, or that I have to have these boring conversations. It's like,
It's so true. And like, it's interesting as well how you said that, you know, men say it's so hard out here for men on dating apps. And like, if the worst things that's happening to you on dating apps is that people aren't speaking, whereas we receive like unsolicited nudes, females get assaulted more often, you show up on a date and, or like they might send you like, you know, sexual stuff or just all these other things that, you know, I think that cis men might have no idea about. Like, that's actually a bad experience on a dating app. I'd say
yeah,
someone not replying is just a non-experience. It's not a bad experience.
yeah, for sure. And I, in that conversation chapter as well, I do include some of like the genuine opening lines that men use to women. So
I'd love to hear them.
and, you know, so I had to slightly edit them, you know, but things like first line, can you pee on me? Or nice boobs. Are you a washing machine? Because I'd like to fill you with my dirty load.
Oh my god!
Surely not. You know, can I come over and destroy your pussy? Always, really, you know, for those of us with vaginas, always really attractive, you know, to think about it being destroyed by a man we don't know.
I know. And it's like the amount of issues that like people with vaginas encounter with their vaginas throughout their life.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want it to be destroyed.
No,
there's
man.
always shit going on with that thing. Like, the last thing I need is someone come and destroy it.
I think that if someone ever said that to me directly, I'd probably say like, no, I've already had a baby, babes. It's done.
And imagine you went to a guy, I'm going to destroy your dick. They'd be like, no, don't. I love my dick.
Yeah. I'm going to come and ruin your dick. I'm going to absolutely, do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm going to shred that thing up like a
I'm
cheese
break
grater.
Your dick. Like, what?
What the fuck?
Why would you? Yeah. I'd like the cheese grater thing. I mean, I'm sure there is someone, there are communities of people who find that very exciting.
You would love it,
in general, the men who are telling us that they want to destroy our pussies are not, you know, up for the same amount of destruction.
Destruction. Obliteration.
Yeah.
Oh, funny. The next chapter I've picked is D for no drama. So do you want to read me the description for that one?
Yeah, sure. So this is one I know better. I think this is one of like just generally people's worst ones. So the translation here is, don't have emotions or opinions or challenge me in any way. A personality is acceptable as long as you turn it down a bit. Because I just think that drama is a very gendered thing. Now, like, women put this in their bios, but in terms of what and men who date women are saying no drama, they are often characterizing women as hysterical, as like our normal emotional reactions are dramatic. And by saying that straight up, they are kind of saying like, you don't get to have your full range of, you know, emotions. Just be cool, give me a blowjob, leave me alone. Like, and you know, and that is, you know, it's kind of from the outset, like, don't be dramatic. Don't be dramatic like that, you know, like, oh, like my psycho ex or whatever, you know, or so
which is a red flag in itself, isn't it? Because it's always like they always have all my exes as psychos, but it's like, what's the common denominator there, doll?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's you. And I like that the antithesis to that like emotional normal woman that expresses and explores her feelings is the cool girl. And you speak about the cool girl in there, which is sort of popularized by Gillian Flynn's novel Gone Girl, and there's the movie with Ben Affleck as well. And the cool girl is sort of, I'd love if you can help me explain this, but it's like the girl that will like eat pizza on a Friday night, is a gamer, all these things, but you know, she might not actually like that stuff, because I actually do like that stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that, but
I mean,
it's
pizza
more
on a Friday night, great, but still be thin,
being hot, being quiet. You know, if someone is, it's like slagging off feminists to impress men, even if you are a feminist, just because you want the approval of men. So it's all about the approval of men, and like doing things that aren't actually true to being yourself, even if you want to, because you want to impress men. That's sort of the gist of it.
And I think like, I think there's a bit of crossover there with like the idea of the pick me, which I kind of don't really like.
Pick me girls,
but I think the cool girls can also, it's also just like, I'm cool with that. Everything's cool. Like, you know, oh babe, I know I said I'd come over tonight, but the lads are going out drinking. Oh yeah, that's cool. Or like, you know, whatever you want to do sexually is cool, whatever. Like, I don't have my own preferences. I don't have my own, like, inclinations. I don't have boundaries. Like, I'll basically, you know, bend to the point of breaking, literally and metaphorically, to please you, because I'm cool, because I'm, you know, and I've been that girl loads of times. I mean, maybe not to that extreme extent, but like, and I think often when you're in it, you don't know you're doing it. I've come out of relationships or come out of like situationships and thought, what the fuck? Like, what was I doing? Why was I going, yeah, that's cool. Like, why was I, you know, not being my own personality with that person, because I desperately wanted them to like me.
It's strange how, as well, women may, like, I've done this where you repress your emotions and, you know, you don't want your emotions and your feelings to be unattractive, and, you know, you feel probably subconsciously manipulated to behave a certain way. But, you know, there's no telling what a guy that you like might even find attractive. Something that women feel pressured to do because I guess it's part of the patriarchy, is that men are expected to act and behave in a certain way, and then women's belief of what that is, you know, we behave in accordance to that as well. Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, I think so. I think like a lot of what patriarchal society is now, especially in the West, is a valuing of different attributes that are seen as feminine and masculine. So, you know, and some like feminine attributes are valued in women, like caregiving, and, you know, which might be seen as like emasculating in men. Although now they're also sometimes celebrated like it's some kind of superhero feat when a dad like looks after his own children. But also some of the things like an emotional range, expressing emotions, is sort of kind of seen in some, you know, in like a lot of societal messaging as like undesirable, like you'll become less desirable, you know, and obviously that's to do with it being like a feminine trait, and I think, you know, it's a sad one for everyone involved, because men get one emotion, it's anger. That's the only one they're allowed to show outside a football stadium. So like, I don't know, but yeah, I think I do get what you mean, and I think it's definitely the case that just in general, like, feminine traits are seen as like weaker or less desirable, like less impressive, certainly not impressive.
No, I really love that chapter. And the next one I've got is F, which is looking for some fun. So if you want to read us the description for that one, because this one there's some really funny references in this one.
Oh, right. Well, I am sure that everyone knows what fun what this means. I don't imagine anyone doesn't know what this means. Translation is just sex. I'm looking for some sex. You know, the fun might, you know, some people are looking for a variety of fun, but the sex is always part of the fun, right? Like, no one's just looking for like, oh my God, let's just like go out and see what, like, have a nice time and like have a little adventure in the city and like go on a Ferris wheel, but as long as we're going to have sex on the Ferris wheel type thing. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's, you know, it's heavily implied. And I talk a lot about in the chapter about how even though so many people are on dating apps wanting sex, people are so bad at talking about sex. And like, for men, it's often the case that they talk too much about sex too quickly, you know. It's not even really sex, is it? It's just like projecting their fantasies onto you. I mean, I mean, if the way that men talk to women on dating apps so much of the time is sexual harassment, like if it was in any other context, you'd be like, that is wildly inappropriate, but somehow it's become normalized almost on dating apps to just...
And that's the thing as well. It's like, if you know, when you log on to a dating app, you're not just agreeing to be sexually harassed. It's like when people are like, oh, well, you know, I wouldn't like go and grind on a girl and touch her ass in the supermarket, but when you're in a club, it's different. Like, why is that different? Did I sign a waiver when I entered the door that said guys are allowed to put their hand up your skirt? Like, would you do that to someone in Sainsbury's? Like, I just find it so weird that the context of it changes, but there's no, like, where does this assumption come from? I think it's probably alcohol and stuff, you know, people like lower their inhibitions and that when you're out, like maybe that's the root of it. But then maybe it's also like when people are on dating apps, guys are just horny and like they think that because they're horny they can just do things. Like I don't know where it's coming from. It's so strange that these these spaces are made with these connotations, but why?
I think it's kind of partly why I wrote the book and why I find dating apps so interesting as a way to like look at misogyny through the lens of dating apps. And it's because there's kind of a relative anonymity of dating apps. Same way you go on social media, especially like Twitter, even the accounts that are like actual people that you can see, they will be meaner, they will be whatever, more outrageous, whatever, than they would be in real life, right? Because there's that degree of separation. And obviously the accounts that don't have like an actual person, identified will be super, super mean. And I think dating apps have an element of that, but in a way it's kind of almost one step removed because nobody else is seeing what you're saying. So if you want to be misogynistic, if you do have misogynistic tendencies, if you are the kind of man who will objectify a woman, you can just do it because the only person who will see is the woman that you're doing it to. And so, nobody's going through, it's not even like a Twitter thread or a Facebook rant or whatever, where some other people are going like, hey dude, and so I think dating apps reveal, I don't think they make the misogyny, but I think they reveal it because men, are those men who are misogynists are, just able to do what they want. And it's actually frightening how many, like what proportion of men there are who are like that. Really kind of puts it into relief. But, I don't think it's terms of like, the space itself creates the misogyny, but it definitely does facilitate it being expressed, I suppose.
Yeah, and this sort of leads into the next chapter that I selected, which was Jay, and it was chill out, it's just a joke. And this is one of the more serious chapters in the book because there really is nothing funny about getting sexually harassed in dating apps. And like, we can look at things with a light-hearted lens, and like you said earlier, it's not that deep. But do you want to read me the description for this chapter and just sort of chat me through what inspired you for this one?
Yeah. So earlier in the book I do Beers for Banter, and I talk a bit about just kind of like the slightly more harmless but just kind of annoying bro version of what humor is. But I kind of wanted to put it in 2 chapters, so there's also J is for joking, and chill out, it was just a joke. The translation is, I've tried to push your boundaries or generally been gross, but now you're calling me out on it, so I'll pretend I was never serious in the first place. And so this one is where it gets a bit more how this kind of like chill out, it was just joking, it's you're too uptight, gets deployed to excuse bad behavior, excuse prejudice. And I think I talk in this chapter a bit about how this kind of tactic is used by the far right online to kind of fish for new recruits. And it seems like maybe a bit, I think if you read the chapter, you'd be like, what? Why is she going to the far right all of a sudden? But there's this playbook, which is basically write everything like it could be a joke. But it'll kind of dog whistle to the people that are already sympathetic with your views. So, if somebody says something racist in a group of white people, and people laugh, like make a racist joke, say, and all of the people laugh, or if not necessarily just in a group of white people, but just say, they won't go, oh my God, stop laughing, I was being racist, like I was.
Yeah, they'll just keep going, like
or like, but if someone goes like, or like, what, that's not okay, like that's not funny, they'll be like, oh my God, chill out, like it was just a joke, like.
Yeah, but then if people were encouraging them, they can keep going, like, and they wouldn't have to say it was just a joke because it's like no one actually calls them out.
Yeah, and sorry, that was kind of a bad example because even if they were saying it seriously, if nobody challenged them, stay serious, but kind of like in a dry way. And a lot of like right-wing media outlets do this. They kind of, I mean, Andrew Tate's doing it now, the guy who got banned from all the platforms. He's going like it was a satirical character, like chill out, it was just a satirical character who was saying that women are responsible for their own. It's like, oh my God, well, don't do that character then, dude, because it's like not funny and really dangerous.
And the fact as well that you said that the guy who wrote the playbook, which was sort of the idea behind, you know, seeing what you can get away with and then passing it off as a joke if people call you out. He's a neo-Nazi, for fuck's sake. Like
Yeah.
if people are reading that, like that's your first red flag.
Yeah.
Like just even knowing the history and the background and what's behind all of that, it should, you know, spark something. But if
Yeah.
people are actually like, you must be so far down the rabbit hole to get to that point, read a playbook written by a neo-Nazi and deploy those tactics to get your message out and link with like-minded people. Like
Yeah.
it's actually terrifying. Like
Yeah.
it's there's some dark corners of the internet that are just fucking
For
scary.
Sure. I learned about that like playbook. It was leaked by the Huffington Post in 2017, but I learned about it through Laura Bates' book Men Who Hate Women, which is all about extremist misogyny on the internet. And it's a really tough read, but it's really important because you do really start to notice all of the ways those kind of really extreme misogynists and like which is very much linked with extreme like the alt-right and racism and anti-Semitism and stuff like that. They tend to run in packs, not completely all of them. There's some racists who aren't misogynistic probably, and some misogynists who aren't racist probably, but you know, they tend to, you know, go together very well, because they're serving the same master in the end, really, which is like rich white men. But yeah, the book, Laura Bates' book, Men Who Hate Women, it is a tough read, but it's really goes through all the kind of different extremist misogynist cells on the internet. And that's where I heard about this. He wrote it, I think, for people who were writing for his website, which I don't name in the book, which was actually my publisher's. She said, we don't need to.
Don't publicize him. Don't.
I've used his name, but not the actual website. So it was like a kind of like, this is how you do it in order to get away with it. And I don't think it's, you know, like every man who says chill out, it was just a joke has read a neo-Nazi's playbook, but it's interesting to look at the how those things mirror each other actually. And how, you know, I talk also in this chapter, and I wish if anyone knows out there who came up with the idea of Schrodinger's douchebag, I would love to like give them all the credit in the world.
Schrodinger's douchebag.
I really tried to find out because I hate like, you know, quoting things or saying things where I'm not giving credit. So, but basically that is the theory that someone says something offensive and it is or isn't a joke, based on whether or not you laugh.
That's so good.
Or whether or not you're offended. So, sorry, it is or isn't a joke. If you're offended, it was a joke. If you're not offended, they were serious, you know?
Then it was serious, yeah. I want to call this episode Schrodinger's douchebag now. It's a beautiful term. I loved it. But my final chapter, this one's another bit of a serious one, but it, you know, there was so much funny stuff in this chapter as well. It was K for swipe right if you're kinky. And I'll get you to read the description of this in a sec. But, you know, I loved in this chapter reading about, you sort of spoke about the BDSM community's views on choking and that being so dangerous compared to, you know, some of the other practices that they do. And I did an episode last season with a woman she's a 24/7 sub in a sub-dom marriage. So they have like a contract and it's just her life. And she said as well, this pretty much links exactly to what you said about the BDSM community who have all these rules in place, like safe, sane, and consensual. And, you know, there's so many different practices in place like aftercare and stuff that make BDSM possible and something that is sustainable. But she spoke about the app Field, which is kind of like it's like Tinder, but it's more sexually free and people are quite honest about like their desires and that sort of thing. But there's so many fuckboys out there, and just like, I think in the book you call them drunk dude bros who don't know any of these regulations and practices and about safe sex and consensual sex and everything. And they're presenting a huge danger to women and just vulnerable people in general, because, you know, they want to be kinky, but their idea of kinky is just going in full throttle, like
just violence,
pounding, really. Just violence. And it's just, again, it's so terrifying. But if you want to read the description before I get ahead of myself, which is for Kay.
Yeah, so swipe right if you're kinky. Often people just write kinky in their bio. Translation. I wouldn't know the first thing about consensual, playful kink. I just describe myself as a dom because I like hitting, choking, and hair pulling without asking whether or not my sexual partner will enjoy it.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of the thing is that you get so many men on dating apps saying dom. They just say dom, or they say like, you know, I like I'm seeing this more and more. I like a submissive feminine woman, and it's like, do you not understand what like a? I mean, obviously there are people in like 24/7 some dom sub relationships, but that is very, very rare. Most people who are interested in like exploring domination and submission are like not doing it outside the bedroom necessarily, you know, like a lot of women who really like to be submissive in bed are incredibly assertive everywhere else, you know. And in fact, maybe that, I think some of them are a bit, that's kind of why it's like, do you know what, you just you just do it. I'm you know, like, you know what I mean, like I want someone else to take control because I've been taking control of everything. But they but yeah, so like there's a lot of guys who will say they're dominant, or they'll say they're kinky, or they'll say that like they don't like vanilla, which is another chapter. It's kind of a companion chapter, is V is for vanilla, because there's so much to talk about on that subject of basically when I was young, the word kind of was frigid, right? And it was like you were shamed, and often that was like that you wouldn't kiss a boy, or maybe that you wouldn't have, when you're a bit older, you wouldn't have sex with, like have penetrative sex with a boy, or like give him a blowjob or something. But now it like vanilla is the kind of new frigid, and it's basically like you won't do like anal or whatever, like, or like things that are actually like, you need to have some knowledge in order to make them pleasurable, especially if you are the one being penetrated or being spanked or whatever. You need to have some kind of ability to communicate with your partner. You need to have some kind of knowledge of how to make it, you know, fun for your partner. You need to have safe words. You need to know about role and consent. You need to know about, in the BDSM community, you know, there might be the most kind of like extreme, they call them scenes, you know, we agree to what we're going to do in this scene, and then we do it, what the parameters are. But there's also aftercare. There's like, what do you require after it? Some people might be like, well, I like to be cuddled, or some people might like, you know, be like, I want, you know, this is what I need. I want to talk about it afterwards or whatever. And that's like so different. It's just so different from what these men who are saying I'm a dom or I'm kinky on dating apps, which is basically like, I want to pull your hair and fuck you from behind, which, by the way, it's actually not kinky at all. It's pretty boring.
And like, I hate that vanilla now has a negative connotation to those kind of men, and they use it to shame women into doing acts that they're not comfortable with, which I think is just so fucked up. And like, I just, and in the BDSM community, vanilla doesn't have a negative connotation at all. It just means that you just want to practice like more conventional sex, which is fine. Like, it's not a bad thing. It just means like that's what you prefer. It's just vanilla is used as like a describing word, like, you know, like any other BDSM kink, like being a brat or being a rope bunny or whatever. It's not like there's a bad and a good type.
It's just a description. Kink. It's a bit like, I don't know. Yeah. Like saying, I don't know, cis and trans. Like they're not, they certainly shouldn't have a value attached to them. It's just different things or whatever. You know, vanilla and vanilla is what is not kink, basically. It's just like sex that is outside the kink community and outside BDSM, you know. You can it can be hot fucking sex, you know, it can be loads of different positions. It can be like you could have vanilla sex on the fucking top of the Eiffel Tower, like that would still be vanilla sex if you weren't engaging any kind of kink. Do you know what I mean? Like
top of the Eiffel Tower.
Unless your kink, I guess, was sex on top of the Eiffel Tower. I mean, I don't know, but like
probably
I guess actually sex in public is probably a kinky thing. But I meant like you know, without people seeing. Anyway, you know what I mean? Like you could join the Mile High Club, and that would be vanilla sex. Like, you know, it's just people making it out like it's dull. I mean, I am a very big advocate of missionary position. I think it's been absolutely. It's great. I mean, hello, what everyone like face to face, like all parts of your bodies are touching. Thank you. Yes.
And there was something else in the chapter as well that I loved, or it might have been another point in the book when it was like so many of the words that are used to describe sex are violent words, or just words that are like pounding, smashing, like I can't think of like
Well,
banging.
we were kind of talking about it earlier, like I'm going to ruin you, I'm going to destroy your pussy, like, like smashing. And it's usually, if it's heterosexual sex, it's often that like the man is the actor, the man is the person doing the pounding or the smashing or the
doing the sex rather than having sex with a person.
Yeah, so it's like something that has been, I'm going to come over and do this thing to you. Like sex is a thing that's done to a woman by a man, and then like we wonder why women's pleasure hasn't been prioritized. But then of course women are also shamed for like enjoying having lots of sex. So it's all fun and games.
We can't win, can we, Aileen? Honestly. Well, that's my final letter that I've chose. So if everyone listening wants to read more, you will have to go and buy the book. And can you remind me what date it is released?
It's released in the UK on the 13th of October. It's released, if you've got any Australian listeners, which I imagine you might.
Definitely.
It's released on the 6th of October in Australia, so you get it a week earlier.
Oh my God.
But yeah, so it's really close now. And you can, if you go to my Instagram, which is @TinderTranslators, there's the link in my bio and you can order it there. Or you can just Google Tinder Translator because it comes up on Google like a real book. It's crazy.
So exciting. Oh, I'm really happy for you. It's super exciting. And thank you so much for jumping on the podcast. It's been a pleasure to have you.
Thank you for reading and thinking about it so deeply. It's really great to have these conversations.
I hope you enjoyed my chat with Aileen. Please let me know on my Instagram, my website, Twitter, TikTok, wherever, if you have any stories or thoughts of your own to share. Love and elbow taps. Peace.